All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for our session, A Journey to First-Class Personalized Customer IAM, featuring Neiman Marcus Group. My name is Mark Von Mandel. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager at AWS covering identity services, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our terrific customer, Shriram. Shriram, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Shriram. I'm with Neiman Marcus Group. I lead omni-channel engineering for Neiman Marcus, and I've been with the company for about 6 years now. Yeah, so happy to be here with Mark and just share our journey a little bit in terms of how we leverage Cognito as part of our digital transformation ecosystem.
Awesome. So today we've got an exciting story. We'll share the work that Neiman Marcus went through, covering how they built cloud-native customer IAM with Amazon Cognito. Shriram will share a brief overview of his organization and the situation there, how they built cloud-native customer identity and access management using Amazon Cognito, how they went through their migration, and some of the integration patterns they went through with serverless, advanced security, and analytics. So get ready for some insights and think about how to apply strategy as well as execution to your customer IAM in your organization. Before we get started there, we all know customer identity and access management at this point. It's really the heart of our digital experiences, but it's not only just the technologies for sign up, sign in, and access, but it's a combination of the strategy and execution that organizations use to streamline their customer experience, assembling different user journey events in a tailored and very personalized approach. That's no easy feat, which we'll hear today. Often a multi-year journey with continuous improvements along the way. Organizations that implement customer IAM need to think about how they engage their customers, knowing how to balance security and offering a seamless experience that delights customers. They have to unify their brand experience, reaching customers wherever they are, but also making sure that there's a consistent omni-channel experience as well. They personalize the experience, meaning that they build targeted and dynamic digital experiences for their customers. And finally, there's the operational element, considerations where you have to think about how to reduce the cost of acquiring and maintaining those customers, particularly in the realm of customer support and account recovery. So how your organization tailors this strategy depends a lot on the use cases and business outcomes that your organization is looking to achieve. And you might ask, how are organizations driving these outcomes with AWS? First and foremost, there's the business to customer or consumer use case. This is what many organizations use for authenticating customers or consumers into their mobile and web applications. And we'll hear from Shriram in this area. A close second for AWS is B2B and multi-tenant applications. We see this a lot too. Large organizations create applications that they set up as SaaS products for other businesses. A third use case, which is really emerging, you probably heard this in our keynotes today, customers with edge or IoT use cases is another emerging area within customer identity. And finally, this is unique to AWS, and this is also a part of the Neiman Marcus Group story, is credential brokering. What I mean by that is connecting your web and mobile application resources to AWS resources to help facilitate further advancement across serverless, analytics, as well as security. Just a main point here, across all of these use cases, Amazon Cognito processes more than 100 billion authentications per month across these key use cases, and we're thrilled to share the story. And with that, I'll pass this over to Shriram.
Thank you, Mark. Good afternoon. So as I indicated before I actually go into kind of the journey that we took in terms of transformation and more specifically how we leverage Cognito within our ecosystem, let me just give a brief about Neiman Marcus Group. We're essentially one of the largest multi-brand integrated retailers, luxury retailers out there, and we serve our customers through a mix of online e-commerce stores and remote selling via our sales associates. Our flagship brands are obviously the Neiman Marcus brand and then our ultra luxury line, which is the Bergdorf Goodman brand. So moving on, what were some of the key challenges that we had, right? Especially when it came to identity and access management. I mean, This is a bridge that almost every firm has to cross when you're doing digital transformation. And one of the founding pillars for us was to leverage the right set of tools and technologies to transform our identity and access management. And the challenges obviously is that we had a homegrown identity system, hard to scale. We had to spend a lot of time and effort to keep patching it, keep it up to date. And then obviously there is a limit to which it can scale with on-prem infrastructure. So if from a security standpoint, we were always trying to catch up rather than actually have the latest and greatest be available, right? So those are some of the few things that we had to actually overcome. And from a core requirements, if we have to drill down from a security standpoint, obviously better user and account management, hardening API security. You can get to API security without having a good authentication and authorization framework, right? Which is one of the things that Cognito provides out of the box seamlessly. And then from a developer standpoint, we wanted to simplify and have the developer focus more on what matters for us, right? So again, Cognito was one piece of it, and then moving to more of serverless and cloud-native workloads was a major part of it as well. And then from an optimization standpoint, we had to build capabilities which were very fine-grained, very individual capabilities, so that we can actually have access controls at a very granular level, right? So basically, making it more event-driven, making the capabilities and breaking it down very clearly from a monolithic system that we had. So essentially, those sort of optimizations we had to do. And obviously, one of the bigger benefits that we were expecting to leverage, and we were actually able to leverage, was the insights with identity graphs and how users, knowing who the user is, knowing who the customer is, and how they're accessing our websites, what actions are they taking, and what brands are they looking at, and so tying all of these together at the back end of it to make more sense of it, so that we can offer more compelling experiences for our customers. So those were all some of the key things that we wanted to get out of this transformation. So moving on, from a high-level architecture standpoint, these were some of the key services that we leveraged from AWS, but not all of it. And obviously, identity as a foundation was key for us, right? So that was one of the key things that we had to solve. And then essentially, security by design, right? So we had to left shift our security practices and make sure that every team were actually looking at security as a key thing right from inception, right? And not as an afterthought when some team actually runs scanners and then provides, hey, your code has having all these vulnerabilities and so on and so forth. So we didn't want to be that. So that implied we had to change our culture in terms of how we operated. So, and then again, building independent capabilities. Why not serverless? Why not cloud native, right? Leave the undifferentiated heavy lifting to AWS or your cloud provider and focus on what matters, right? So essentially, those were some of the pivots that we had to do. Again, capabilities were exposed as APIs, and then events were actually, generated by business events, so that any interested system within our ecosystem can actually react appropriately to it. So those were all some key things that we had to put in place. And then moving on, how did we actually leverage transitioning our customer identities from our legacy storage to the Cognito user directory? So essentially, one of the key things that we wanted to do was make sure that the customer was not impacted, and there was no friction when we did this. So the way we actually leveraged was there was a custom workflow that we can actually leverage with Cognito that enabled us to enabled us to react to different events and be able to create a custom challenge trigger flow with Lambda functions that enabled us to make sure that we were able to seamlessly transition from our existing legacy IDP to our Cognito user directory. So we leveraged challenges, essentially making sure that that a customer was able to go through those challenges, but this all happened behind the scenes, right? The customer did not see any difference in terms of how they reacted. It was all done behind the scenes via code where when a particular event happened, we go and look at the old IDP. So let's say a customer came into the website and tried to sign in. We first have a trigger that will actually go in and check if that user is present in our existing legacy IDP. If the customer was present, we seamlessly migrated that customer into Cognito. And then once all of the challenges were verified, we went back and gave the customer the tokens they needed to then access resources within our website. And then once the user was migrated, we actually marked the user in the legacy IDP as migrated and so on and so forth. And then after some period of time, that user will actually fall off from the older IDP, right? So that's how we had to do, and we had to do this over a period of time, right? You can't know how when customers will actually all migrate, when do they visit the site to be able to be migrated, because this was on-demand migration. So we had to run this over a period of time until we had a critical mass of all of the customers to have migrated over to to Cognito. Before then, we kind of pulled the plug and said, anybody that didn't log in, the last 18 months or whatever it is, right? We then had to force reset for them so that they had to reset to get into the website. So that's how the critical mass of our customers, we migrated seamlessly without impact. So that's the key thing there. And then essentially from an access management standpoint, obviously getting customers through the door is one thing, and then having the right level of access provided for the customer is the next thing, right? So that's where authorization comes into play. So we had a custom authorizer that we had built. So based on policies, that custom authorizer will determine what level of access that particular customer had access to, right? So that's where we'll look at an architecture diagram in terms of how we build that custom authorizer. And then token management, obviously, whether it's access token, ID token, or refresh token, you need to be able to manage them effectively, how long the expiry has to be, how often you need to refresh them, and so on and so forth. And then we also had multiple different patterns, like Mark alluded to in the earlier slides. We obviously had the user-based authentication and authorization mechanism. We also had another OAuth 2 grant for machine-to-machine access, which we also leveraged Cognito for it, and that's where we leveraged the client credentials grant to ensure that machines were able to talk to another system seamlessly, using the same OAuth 2 framework, right? Challenges, some of the key things that I would say, is that with user pool, you have to keep in mind that you cannot modify a user pool once it's generated. So for example, if you had to, say that, hey, I need these list of attributes to be required, at a user pool level. If you actually change your mind and if you want to add another attribute to be required, you cannot do that at a later time. So keep in mind in terms of when you're creating the user pool, making it very flexible so that you don't have too many required attributes, and keep it to a bare minimum so that you can then evolve more easily, as your requirements evolve. And then account level limits, that is another thing that you guys need to take care of, which is making sure that your refresh token, your access token, and your quotas and so on, plan for it, right? What is the expiry? How often do you want to refresh your access tokens? Where do you actually store your refresh tokens? Where do you store your access tokens? Those are all important decisions, depending on your security, footprint and so on, security practices. Those determinations are very, very key in terms of, making sure that your system is as secure as possible, right? And then obviously from an integration standpoint, there are multiple ways that you can actually leverage Cognito. if you're doing client-side application versus server-side based application, there are different tooling available. These are some of the options that we have that we looked at. Amplify obviously is a pretty cool service from AWS where we were able to kind of bootstrap applications very, very quickly because it has all the low-level code abstracted if you were to actually integrate with Cognito. So it was very, very easy for us to leverage for some applications. And obviously, if you want to go to a deeper level, a more lower level, you can obviously use the Cognito Identity JavaScript library that provides a little bit more lower level capabilities. And then if you want the lowest level, obviously AWS SDK is available. And then limiting resource access to least privilege is another key thing that we had to do to make sure that we are not exposing every method of a service or every capability to all users, right? So there are certain class of users that based on their access token, we were able to kind of provide a little bit more fine-grained access. So that was a key thing that we had to do. And then obviously user pools. Another thing is now I think AWS offers WAF protection for user pools. So so that is another key thing to make sure your user pools are not exposed and are secure, so that no bot or anybody cannot access your user pool and bring your quota limits down. So here's the kind of a super high-level view into how we leveraged Cognito. Again, customer is signing in via our customer-facing channels, whether it's a web app or the mobile apps. Cognito is used as a primary IDP for all of our customer-facing channels, and then essentially Cognito provides the access token back based on these challenge flows that I talked about earlier. And then once the customer gets the access token, they try to access a capability API, and that API will then all APIs are then secured, whether it's API gateway powered APIs or whether it is ALB, Fargate, powered services. All of them then link to a custom authorizer that we have, which essentially verifies the token that the customer presented, and then ensures that the token first of all is valid. If the token is valid, then essentially it figures out what level of access does this token get, and then based on that level of access, the capability API will come back and execute the capability, and then give a 200 back, or otherwise the customer will get a 401, right? So essentially that's kind of at a super high level. And then I have I think there is a federated IDP that you can leverage as well, right? So we had another use case where we leveraged Cognito as a pass-through to a federated IDP, especially for our internal users and internal applications. And you can obviously do federation with an enterprise IDP like your Active Directory, or you could also do a federated to a social login like Facebook, Google, Apple, so on and so forth, right? So essentially, Cognito abstracts it. Cognito acts as the IDP as the intermediary, and then Cognito is the one that provides the user tokens to the application. So it's very, very seamless and within the AWS ecosystem for us. So we didn't have to go and figure out how to connect Cognito to the other IDP and so on and so forth. So Cognito abstracted the complexity, and essentially we were able to leverage the same mechanism for our internal customers and applications as well. Moving on, so from a journey thus far, we're happy to say that we have a very future-proofed architecture that we have in place, which enables us to evolve, and those were all because of the fact that we went to cloud native as much as possible and serverless, and then building systems that are very, very loosely coupled, so that there is not like it's not like a pack of cards where every capability is dependent on another capability, synchronously hardwired. So that was one of the key things. identity platform for authorization and authentication, which was one of the core foundational building blocks for us. And then the analytics and customer insights, right? So we get a lot of information about who are the visitors visiting our site, what are their device graphs, what devices they use, what do they access, how do we actually tie all of this information, behind the scenes so that we can, use that for, improving our intelligence in terms of how we actually then, go back to our customers, right? So that was one of the key things that we had put in place as well. So moving on, I think from a speed to market standpoint, it was a tremendous increase for us, in terms of how quickly we were able to deliver features and take it to market, pilot, test it, and then go back, fix it and rinse and repeat and so on. So that was a key thing for us to that we were able to do with serverless and cloud native workloads. And then development costs, obviously. We were not in the business of managing infrastructure. AWS was managing it for us. So we were focused on, essentially making sure that we were, solving the problem for the business, right? So essentially our development focus was very, very narrow and very critical and to the point for our business. So essentially that helped. And then improved velocity, elasticity and agility across the board. So this translated to business agility, right? So because we had a really, really foundational platform and architecture that helped us to, put this kind of an architecture in place, that enabled us to actually be very, very, agile in terms of being able to test things for the business and see how it worked, whether it worked or not, and then be able to move quickly. So from an innovation standpoint, it was very, very crucial for us to be able to fail fast, right? So that's one of the key things that we say across the org, right? And so that we can learn from it, move on, or drop that idea, right? So and then the other big thing was with the customer insights and data we collected, we were able to build deeper relationships with our customer, and offer more compelling and personalized experiences. And obviously, we talked about the foundational ecosystem. Lessons learned, I think one of the things that happened for us as part of the cloud journey was the leadership buy-in, right from the top, right? Everybody was committed to making sure that it was not only a technological transformation, it was more of a cultural transformation, and everybody was supportive of that fact. And again, cultural changes, whether it's product operating model, whether it is being able to, how do you actually break down your teams? Do you actually break down by capabilities? Do you break it down by, different domains? I mean, so those kind of decisions are very important in terms of being able to give that independence and autonomy to your teams to be able to, innovate, fail fast, and evolve. So those were key things for us to, from a lessons learned standpoint, and then building the right architecture, right? So, in the past we had a monolithic system. We were tied to a certain database, tied to a certain ecosystem. Now that's not the case. Pick the right tool for the job, right? Whether it is your, DynamoDB key value pair, store, whether it is a Elasticsearch, whether it is a time stream database, right? So you have so many different things available for you. So pick the right tool for the job, from an architecture standpoint. That is essentially very, very key for where we are, right? So with that, I think we've come to the end of it. I think, Mark, anything else you want to add?
Yeah, Shriram, great story. Yeah. Lots of great innovation from your organization. Really appreciate you sharing that with the audience today. We do have a few resources for anybody in the audience. We have a Cognito workshop that will walk you through kind of step by step on how to put together these different pieces for your authentication and authorization journey. We also have, from last year, a couple other resources related to master classes for CIAM, and as well as a kind of a B2G use case. We'll take questions offline. I just saw that we're out of time, but again, thank you all so much for showing up, and we'll see you